There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining. You couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful. All right. And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is.
Quentin Tarantino just lit up modern-day Hollywood in a scorcher of an interview with the always unfiltered Bill Maher, and it was absolutely priceless. The iconic filmmaker didn't pull any punches, ripping into his loudest critics and calling them out as performative, woke hypocrites. Maher, never one to shy away from controversy, fired back with some sharp barbs of his own. If you're a fan of raw, unapologetic political commentary, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. You won't want to miss moments this explosive.
Before we run out of time, I have to say to you, besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back. When anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you, they tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And you do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little pussy, you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
Bill Maher has never hidden his disdain for Hollywood's fixation on woke messaging. And if you've been watching this channel, you know I've called it out plenty too. The industry has traded meaningful storytelling for virtue signaling, swapping depth for hashtags and substance for slogans. But here's the twist. Even in the thick haze of Hollywood's ideological echo chamber, a few voices still cut through. One of the brightest, Quentin Tarantino. Even Maher, a relentless critic of Hollywood, holds deep respect for him, and it's easy to see why. Tarantino is unapologetically old school. He doesn't pander, he doesn't preach, and he's certainly not caught up in the latest ideological trends. He still believes in the power of provocative, daring storytelling. Films that push boundaries and challenge audiences rather than coddle them. In a town where most creators are scared to step outside the lines, Tarantino grabs a new pen and draws entirely different ones. It's rare, it's bold, and honestly, it's exactly what Hollywood needs.
There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers and superhero movies.
And this is exactly why Bill Maher respects Quentin Tarantino, because he's one of the few voices on the left willing to call out the absurdity within his own ranks. Tarantino doesn't dance around the truth, and Maher recognizes how rare that is in today's Hollywood. We've seen the entertainment industry drift further from creativity and genuine storytelling, instead planting its flag in ideology and performative virtue signaling. A perfect example, the disastrous Snow White reboot, a film that bombed both critically and commercially. Why? Because instead of focusing on crafting a compelling narrative, the filmmakers prioritized messaging. They chose not to cast actual little people in the roles of the Seven Dwarfs, citing stigma and sensitivity. But in doing so, they replaced real actors, many of whom proudly embraced those roles, with CGI creations. That's not progress. That's condescension. And it's exactly the kind of hollow posturing that both Tarantino and Maher aren't afraid to tear down.
Bullish on the future of movies because...
Well, look, you have to always look at...
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happens... This comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves, all right? So it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s, all right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir. where you actually, even though with the Hays Code, you had these dark, dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades, where you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful, all right? And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is. And then, to me, it's one of the worst decades in Hollywood is the 50s. And then the 60s, pretty much from like 1960 to 1966, was the 50s part 2.
Let's pause for a moment, because Tarantino made a really compelling point. He brought up the Hays Code, a set of moral guidelines introduced in the 1930s that gave Hollywood studios the power to self-censor anything considered too provocative, especially when it came to sexual content. Back then, critics saw it as a direct assault on free speech and artistic freedom, a way to sanitize storytelling in favor of moral conformity. Now here's the twist. Tarantino believes we're seeing a modern version of that same censorship today. But this time, it's not coming from government regulators or church-backed watchdogs. It's coming from online outrage mobs and hyper-militant social justice warriors. Cancel culture has replaced the Hays Code. Films are no longer evaluated by their artistic merit, but by how well they align with the ever-shifting demands of digital ideologues. Directors tiptoe through scripts, screenwriters water down their ideas, and studios buckle under the weight of Twitter backlash. It's censorship wrapped in the language of progress, and Tarantino sees it as every bit as dangerous, if not more, than the original Hays Code ever was.
But then what we think of as the 60s starts in about 67, and that's when New Hollywood
Bonnie
comes out. Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to the homogenized 50s.
So it's going to come back again.
Okay, and then it goes into the 70s, but then we went into the 80s.
All right.
And that's why you came up with politically incorrect, because that was the first. This is basically the 80s part 2, what we're living through right now.
Well, I'll just take one more go at it. There's going to be a new golden age. Please be there and part of it.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. Tarantino actually believes that Hollywood might finally be cleansing itself of the woke obsession. And if that's true, all I can say is, amen, because honestly, it's long overdue. This wave of performative wokeness hasn't just been exhausting, it's been creatively suffocating. Instead of inspiring or entertaining, too many modern films feel like hollow lectures wrapped in lifeless storytelling. It's as if imagination has been handcuffed, replaced by checklists, virtue signals, and politically correct scripting. But if Tarantino's right, and we're finally heading toward a course correction, I'm all in. A new golden age of Hollywood, one that puts compelling characters, powerful narratives, and real emotional resonance ahead of ideological box checking would be a breath of fresh air. Imagine films that challenge us, entertain us, make us think, without preaching at us. That's the Hollywood we once fell in love with. And if this cultural detox is real, then maybe, just maybe, the future of cinema is worth getting excited about again. But before we get too optimistic, Tarantino made a pretty unsettling observation during his recent sit-down with Joe Rogan. Take a look.
And then there's like, okay, this guy or this woman is going to write a think piece in the New Yorker about my movie. Or in the Los Angeles Times, or in the New York Times, and they're going to write some think piece about it, or on this website or that website, and they're going to go against it and talk about, this is a retrograde vision, or that this is a regressive vision, or Quentin has become right wing, and this movie has a right wing bent because of the way they, Quentin is identifying with Rick Dalton with fucking hippies. That's how it's.
Is that really a take that someone had, that you've become right wing because of the character in the film?
Even like a critic who liked it, A.O. Scott, goes, well, this whole vision seems more on the right than you would imagine.
It might sound extreme, but it happens more often than you'd think, especially on the political left. Some people can't help but view every movie through a hyper-political lens. The moment they detect even a hint of conservative themes or right-leaning undertones, they go into meltdown mode. Suddenly, it's not just a film. It's a threat. They unleash full-blown attacks on the production, the cast, the writers, anyone remotely connected to the project, simply for daring to explore values that fall outside their ideological bubble. But here's what often gets lost. Cinema isn't supposed to be an echo chamber. Movies are meant to reflect the complexities of society, its dreams, flaws, contradictions, not conform to a single worldview. They're mirrors, not mouthpieces. Not every film will validate your beliefs, and that's not just okay, it's essential. That's what makes art meaningful. It challenges us, provokes thought, even makes us uncomfortable. Dismissing a film just because it doesn't cater to your politics completely misses the point of what storytelling is all about.
Doesn't necessarily make it wrong, make it bad, but it just seems like more on the right. Well, Rick is coming from a place more on the right, not me.
Yeah.
Per se, but I am telling the story through Rick's point of view. And then, they say something, well, how come they don't talk about, how come there aren't more black characters in the movie? How come they don't talk about the Vietnam War more? Well, basically, the movie takes place between 2 days. Okay, well, they didn't bump into Jim Brown, right, on those 2 days. All right, they saw who they fucking saw. Yeah. During those 2 days. Well, they didn't have a conversation about Vietnam in those 2 days. I can't just deal with all the hot button issues if I'm set up in a thing between 2 days. Oh, Margaret Robbie doesn't talk enough. She spends the entire movie by her fucking self. I could have given her if you were just counting lines, I could have put Mr. Saperstein in the car, with her dog, and she could have just been having a running commentary with her dog about picking up Roman's dry cleaning and getting the book, and maybe I'll go see the movie. And, that would have actually taken care of the line count, but it would have been bullshit.
Exactly. It's about time that social justice warriors and overly sensitive critics in general grasp a simple truth. Not every movie is made to deliver a moral message. Some films exist purely to entertain, to offer escape, to spark joy. And that's not just valid. It's essential. Yes, there are movies designed to confront serious, real-world issues, and those are just as important. But both forms of storytelling have their place in cinema. Not every project needs to shoulder the burden of a cultural crusade. What many forget is that directors are storytellers. Their job isn't to parrot ideology. It's to bring unique visions to life. And often, those visions involve exploring perspectives, characters, or worlds that may not perfectly align with anyone's personal politics. When filmmakers feel pressured to cram social messaging into stories where it doesn't naturally fit, it's not progress. It's artistic sabotage. It disrupts the narrative, weakens the emotional impact, and ultimately dilutes the film's power. The greatest movies don't resonate because they preach. They endure because they connect. Through story, through character, through emotion and honesty. That's what art is supposed to do. So let art beat art.
Doesn't it seem like part of the problem is just that it came out during the time where Trump was president, and that's one of the reasons why these political takes on things, like that he's more to the right, or I can't imagine that anybody would think that you're leaning right now, that Quentin is becoming right because your character is. That seems so stupid, but it's more of it's just a statement about the politicalization of everything.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're correct. And the thing about it, though, is, look, those kind of academic college think pieces, they're just fine. Like in a college situation, they make sense. I can take a book or a movie and come up with some argument that goes, that's like that's more of a subtextual argument about a film. That doesn't mean I'm right, but it means I can make my little argument,
right?
For the course. But it doesn't. But I have no illusions that that's what the director was thinking about. Now, ultimately, when it comes to subtextual criticism, it doesn't matter. It's simply you making your little case. But in the heat of the moment, they're actually treated more seriously than that.
How do you parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film? Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I know what I did. I love what I did. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are. All right, then I have a sense of where thhere coming from and what they're talking about. But
Tarantino makes a powerful and necessary point. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, including critics. Free speech isn't a one-way street. It applies to all, regardless of political stance. He fully understands that not every viewer will love his work, and that's fine. In fact, he welcomes criticism. It comes with the territory. But he draws a firm line when criticism turns personal and malicious. When it stops being about the art and starts becoming about attacking the artist, calling him names, attempting to cancel him, simply because a film or book he created resonates with right-leaning audiences, that's a step too far. Tarantino doesn't create to please everyone. He creates to tell stories that challenge, provoke, and ignite conversation. So yes, disagree with the message if you want. Critique the film if it misses the mark for you. But don't reduce the artist to a political caricature. Don't tarnish his name just because he refuses to follow the ideological script. That's not criticism. That's censorship, masked as moral outrage.
You parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film. Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what, I know what I did, I love what I did, I don't give a fuck?
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are, all right, then I have a sense of where they're coming from and what they're talking about. But like within 3 paragraphs, I see where this guy or woman is coming from, and they either like my stuff or they don't like it.
Right.
And if they're inclined to like my stuff and they go negative on it, that's interesting to see what it is that did that. I mean, a lot of the critics that like me didn't like Hateful Eight. And it all came down to the fact that it was just too rough a vision for them. It was just too cynical. It was too cruel. And that's one of my favorite movies, because I feel like, wow, that's the Sam Peckinpah movie I always wanted to make. It's a fucking cruel, pitiless vision. But it's called The Hateful Eight. The idea is there's no good guys in the